All right. I'm in transit here, as is often the case with me, but it's often while I'm in transit that I really feel the most expansive and most inclined to want to talk about subjects that are, sort of open-ended, subjects that interest me that I don't know the total answer to. And I've really got an ID fixé on the Putin interview. It interested me, it intrigued me on many different levels, and I know I'm not the only one. But I will say right now, I'll just come right out and say it, that I would, while I'm not a Putin bot, while I'm not a Putin stooge, while I don't think Putin is somebody who's had a career that's just been necessarily morally exemplary. I'm sure that he's done bad things en route to power, but I will say that I would rather be ruled by Putin than by just about anyone that my own country would have me be ruled by. I think Putin is I don't think that Putin's rule would be legitimate. Don't get me wrong. I think if Putin were to take over, if there were to be a Russian invasion, Putin were to take over America, or take over like some part of America, say that there was some fractious conflict, some civil war, if you will, and the Russians were to ride in and take over some part of America, or take over the whole of America, I would think that would be a preferential state to be ruled by Putin, to be ruled by one such as Putin, than to be ruled by anyone who rules us now from our own political elites. I think under such circumstances, Putin would be a tyrant, but I think the ones who claim to rule us now are just as tyrannical because their rule is just as illegitimate. I want to be ruled by somebody whose rule is legitimate. And I just don't see that ever happening in my notions of what constitutes legitimacy. Anyhow, what I wanted to spend some time talking about in this video is I wanted to discuss the manner in which the interview began. When Tucker Carlson asked him the question of what is your territorial claim in Ukraine? Why do you feel that you have a claim to at least part of Ukraine, or maybe to the whole of Ukraine? And Putin now infamously went into lecture mode. He gave this historical lecture that went on for about a half an hour, and Tucker Carlson was just sitting there as the translator was repeating, Putin's words. Putin was talking about this happened in Kiev, and this emperor was baptized in the year 678 or whatever. Just going back centuries, going back millennia, talking about, the answer was relevant to the question, but it was just so expansive that it seemed as if, that's the question. That's what I'm interested in, actually throwing out there as a question. because I've heard different people. I know there are people out there who are just the Putin haters, and I'm not interested in what the neocon, neo-lib establishments or their lackeys or their would-be lackeys like Colin Liddell have to say about any of this. But I do think that for those who approached this interview with more of an open mind, there was widespread disagreement. There does seem to be widespread disagreement about the tack that Putin took in giving this half-hour lecture. On this particular occasion, where he's getting interviewed by an American journalist, and all the opportunities that are at his disposal there, the ways in which he can reach his intended audience and give them in some way counter the relentless anti-Russian, anti-Putin propaganda that we get from our own ruling class. He starts off in this rather inauspicious way. People say, well, Americans are just going to get bored, with something like a half-hour lecture about Russian and Ukrainian history. Well, that's true about some Americans. And there are some Americans who are quite illiterate and who don't really care to hear about these kinds of things. Who think it's really kind of dry and not very interesting. There are others there are history buffs who do think it's interesting. But here's the question. Like there were some people who said this was a tactical mistake that Putin made. That he blew it essentially. Right from the start, he could have engaged his interviewer in a way that brought the audience more into his orbit, but instead he gave this long lecture that would seem to be alienating to his intended audience. And there were others who said he did this on purpose. That he's wily. He's he wanted to begin his lecture. He wanted to begin, or he wanted to answer this question in a way that was that in his mind did justice to the question. And I'm inclined to think that this was one of those things that he really felt had strong feelings about and knew a lot about, or his own answer to that question was built on his knowledge of a lot of history. And it's one of those things, if you talk to somebody about something that is an obsession of theirs, they can kind of go off the rails a little bit. They can become what some would call autistic, in the sense that they can just maybe forget who their audience is, forget everything, and just get lost in talking about the topic that they're choosing to talk about. They're talking about the topic that is so important to them, that means so much to them, that has such relevance for them. So how do we interpret what he did? On the one hand, he's a wily politician. He knows how to. He's aware of the circumstances of this interview, and yet he chose to begin it in this way that seemed rather inauspicious, and insofar as it was it was just a long lecture about an arcane subject, what was for many people a rather arcane subject. So why did he do it? That's the question. And I don't really know the answer to it, but it's interesting. I'm inclined to think that Putin is a purposeful, I think he's a sly dog. I think he's got all of his faculties. I remember it seemed like there was a little while ago where the Western media was trying to say, "Oh, look at him. He looks frail. He looks like he's dying." I didn't get that impression from this interview. And then, of course, people said, "Well, maybe it's a double. Maybe what we're really seeing here is his double, and it's not really Putin." All right. Well, I think it was really Putin. I think it was actually him, and I'm inclined to think that he chose to answer Tucker's question in the way that he chose to answer it for a purpose, for a reason. I'm just not sure what it is. I have an easier time believing that than thinking, oh, this was a crucial misstep, or oh, he just got all autistic, and just decided to start going on about this subject. He didn't read the room. I think Putin is somebody who reads the room. And so what did he intend by going that route? Maybe he wanted to show how serious he was. Because remember, he asked Tucker kind of a mocking question, like, is this a talk show, or are we having a serious conversation? And there were a few times like that where he was a little bit chippy with Tucker, or a little bit like, like he said, there was some time where he said, "Well, that's a very subtle question that you're asking now." And I think something was lost in translation. I think he meant sneaky. So he was a little not combative, but he was willing to be somewhat confrontational from time to time. Not to the point of being ornery, but certainly he wasn't just. I mean, he was mostly. It was definitely civil, but I think there were times when he was maybe felt inclined to want to sort of make a move where he saw this as a chess game and he wanted to move his pieces. So I'm a little baffled though about the why he chose to start out the way he did. What do y'all think? Let me know below.